I do it over and over again. That's my life, over and 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 over.
Okay, Clay, I get the point.
No, you.
Hi, welcome to Moralton University. I'm Wes, and I'm joined today by Lauren, Glam, and Senna. And today we are going to be talking about one of the most unhinged characters on the show, Orel's father, Clay Puppington.
Golly, he's so miserable. Gee, he must be the holiest man in all of Moralton.
Clay is Orel Puppington's father, a high-functioning alcoholic who acts as Orel's main source of guidance at the end of most episodes. As described by the original character description, Orel's father rules the home with a stern yet fair hand, fair as long as they coincide conveniently with his method of child-rearing, i.e. the nostalgic post-World War II American way. Clay's core belief is that all his suffering and misery will ultimately get him into heaven.
Besides, God obviously wanted that woman to stay alive, or he would have finished her off himself, without your help.
But why would he want her to suffer, Dad?
Oh, suffering is a big part of God's plan, so it could have been for a number of reasons.
Between the season 3 episodes Passing and Nesting, it can be surmised that Clay's desire to get into heaven is for him to reunite with the mother he lost in childhood.
In the penultimate episode of season 3, Clay is revealed to be the mayor of Moralton in an ironic turn of events. This whole time, his stinking dead-end job was being the head of the town, in parallel to his role as the head of the household. Clay does not like either of these roles.
You don't even like your job.
Like? No one likes their job.
Clay's position as mayor seems like an extension of the dominant macho facade he has cultivated in order to survive in Moralton. Another layer of irony is emphasized with his implication that no one else in town actually wants the job. Being mayor is not like being governor or president. It's often a part-time position that doesn't pay well, if it pays at all. Seeing that no one else wants to do it, it makes sense that in Moralton it's a salaried position. As we've mentioned in previous videos, Kansas and Missouri are the states that would hypothetically border state soda. The mayor of Topeka, Kansas, currently makes $40K a year, which is a reasonable living wage if you don't have a family. In Missouri, the mayor of Jefferson City makes almost nothing. Clay does not make as much as people in the fandom seem to think.
Hey, pal, aren't you listening? I work a dead-end job to make that money.
Clay runs on a macho platform that glorifies dominance, warmongering, death, and religion.
Does hunting and death really pose such a horrible threat to this town? Death, dear friends, is the best thing ever. Death is the beginning of our everlasting life.
How much of this is genuine or influenced by his own death wish is debatable.
Clay is a realistic depiction of a high-functioning alcoholic. Alcoholism, also known as alcohol use disorder or alcohol dependency, is defined by Encyclopedia Britannica as excessive and repetitive drinking of alcoholic beverages to the extent that the drinker repeatedly is harmed or harms others. The harm may be physical or mental. It may also be social, legal, or economic. Because such use is usually considered to be compulsive and under markedly diminished voluntary control, alcoholism is considered by a majority of, but not all, clinicians as an addiction and a disease. People with alcoholism will continue to drink even when drinking causes negative consequences, like losing a job or destroying relationships with people they love. They may know their alcohol use negatively affects their lives, but it's often not enough to make them stop drinking. Dino Stamatopoulos says Clay is him if he hadn't gotten divorced. Dino writes him with the insight of someone who is an alcoholic and seen people close to him struggle with it as well. His alcoholism steadily gets worse as the series goes on. He goes from drinking spiked milk and highballs, watered down with soda or ice, to chugging straight from multiple liquor bottles. Why does he drink? He is deeply fearful, he dislikes the facade he puts up, and himself for not being able to live up to it. His marriage, his job, his social circle. Desires to be oblivious and avoid responsibility for his actions. The series cancellation means that there was no conclusion to his arc in this regard. People around him do not care what happens to him. Alcoholism cannot be managed or overcome alone or without external support. The one person who cares is Orel, and as a child he is in no capacity equipped to help him. What happens with unchecked alcoholism? The shift from high functioning to low functioning can occur after stressful events, which results in a lower quality of life and deteriorating mental and physical health. For someone as dependent on alcohol as Clay, trying to go cold turkey without support would likely kill him. Clay's study functions as a manifestation of his desire to experience oblivion or a return to the womb, a total respite from the anxieties of life. His drinking is done primarily in the isolation of his study. He uses drinking as a self-soothing behavior. Excess drinking means he doesn't remember what he does, which he believes absolves him of his responsibility for any actions he commits while blacked out. Clay also has a morbid fascination with taxidermy and preserving the living form in perpetuity. His mother was embalmed before burial. He likes animals and wants to keep them, much like he describes keeping his family. His drive for hunting is largely projection. He thinks animals need to be put out of their misery. Life is miserable to him.
Clay's psychology is incredibly complicated. In the novel Mother Night, author and satirist Kurt Vonnegut wrote, "We are what we pretend to be, so we must be careful about what we pretend to be." This quote sums up much of the tragedy of Clay's character. He's been playing the part of the husband, head of household, and mayor for years in order to fit into his conservative Christian fundamentalist community. And over the course of the show, we see how this performance has both defined him and destroyed him. One of the core aspects of Clay's character is that he is a closeted homosexual. He grew up in Sinville, where people live more freely, or sinfully, according to Moralton citizens. However, despite being raised in Sinville, he was brought up by his extremely religious mother. In Help, we see a younger version of Clay that openly has no interest in women or marriage. He even tells Gilberta, "I'm not going to have a bride at my own wedding."
I'm not gonna have a bride at my own wedding.
Oh?
Yeah, marriage. Not for me.
In the same episode, heterosexuality is pushed onto him in the form of Gilberta. Although he tries, he's unable to refuse her advances and ends up getting married to her. Clay is unable to quit his performance as a heterosexual man because of Moralton's aggressive reinforcement of heterosexual norms. We see this in many different places throughout the show. Reverend Putty gives several homophobic sermons. Gilberta once refers to gay people as fairy sexuals. Clay himself is homophobic at times. In the episode Omnipresence, he says that God wanted that woman to stay alive and suffer because she might have loved another woman the wrong way. He also says that Stephanie has to be friendly because she's different. She doesn't have the luxury of being unkind or cruel. Because of the pressure that he's under, Clay has to play the part of the masculine heterosexual patriarchal figure. Clay's study is both his sanctuary, where he can be separate from Gilberta and the kids, as well as a representation of the image he's trying to project to the world. The collection of taxidermy trophy animals, the corridor of guns, and the dark, refined furnishings are in contrast to the and more authentic versions of him that we see in Passing and Help. The majority of Clay's time in his study is spent trying to recover from the pain of his everyday life. We often see him drinking, brooding, or wallowing in his own self-loathing. On one occasion, he even threw darts at a picture of himself. Occasionally, Clay will allow himself a moment of vulnerability and happiness when he's in his study, such as when he made the photos of him and Danielle kiss, but the facade always goes back up the moment someone tries to enter his study. One of the most debated aspects of Clay's character is whether he's gay or bisexual. All the evidence in the show points to Clay being gay. He has no attraction to women. There are a few different reasons for this. The first is the fraternal birth order effect. This is a studied phenomenon in which the levels of prenatal hormones in the mother's womb can influence the male fetus towards a homosexual orientation. Angela had 10 miscarriages, half of whom were male. The more older brothers that were carried in the mother's womb, the likelihood of the next brother coming out as gay is increased by 38 to 48%. The mother's body develops an intolerance to male cells in the womb with each male pregnancy, which can result in an eventual male pregnancy where some parts of the brain having to do with attraction might form in the female typical pattern. FBOE is a well-known phenomenon that has been the most consistent predictor of homosexual orientation in men. Another piece that we can apply to Clay to explain why he's gay rather than bisexual is the concept of compulsory heterosexuality. This is a term coined by Adrienne Rich in the essay Compulsory Heterosexuality and Lesbian Existence. Although the term was created to describe how lesbians are made to feel that they must be attracted to men due to the pressures of living in a heteronormative patriarchal society, the term can also be applied to gay men. Gay men are similarly trapped within the societal confines of heterosexual masculinity. Clay is a clear depiction of a gay man struggling with compulsory heterosexuality. The idea that he must be attracted to women is reinforced by his religious upbringing and Moralton's strictly patriarchal fundamentalist society. Compulsory heterosexuality is a complex and deeply painful experience, and Clay exhibits some common behaviors associated with it. For instance, he only shows interest in women at the suggestion of others or to fit in with other men. In Help, Clay, who is very drunk at the time, stares at other women after Blberta asks if he's changed his mind about marriage now that he's been helped out of his shell. In the episode Presents for God, Clay tries to hire 2 sex workers after reading a newspaper article about an STD outbreak caused by men sleeping with those sex workers. When Clay makes this call, he has visible symptoms, but it's implied that he has not hired any sex workers previously. This is because Clay didn't know Orel started the whole thing, and Orel was shocked by his dad calling. We can really only speculate about how Clay contracted an STD because of this, though a likely theory is that he got it from Danielle, who was shown letting sex workers into his hotel room. It's likely, though, knowing that Clay has not consummated his relationship with Danielle, that it was a non-sexual transmission. It is after this event and what appears to be several attempts to rekindle a sexual relationship with his wife, he has his nervous breakdown in nature. Clay's hatred of women also isn't just some run-of-the-mill misogyny. It's deeply personal and rooted in his sexuality that he is forced to hide from both society and himself. His rant in Nature describes feeling violated and traumatized by his marriage and sexual relations with Blberta, and perhaps other women as well. If you're interested in learning more about this, we go over this extensively in our video on purity culture and rape culture.
Okay, but it's not like the creators ever came out and confirmed that Clay is supposed to be gay rather than bisexual.
Do you guys have any idea how fucking outrageous it is to have not just a funny show, but a show about 2 gay men that cannot consummate their relationship?
Well,
was he gay from the outset? Like he had this thing?
Yeah,
going?
the first time he was written, he wrote a long 12-page letter to Clay.
Right.
To homosexuality.
Dear homosexuality, what have you been doing lately?
These pictures of them, being kind of romantic, and that it makes it seem like they are sleeping together. But in my mind, at least, they're not.
No,
Clay is not aware that he's attracted to Danielle. He really is, but he has no.
Clay is definitely aware.
It's like an innocent.
You don't think Clay's aware?
No, he's not aware.
He's not aware.
He's out of his. You're fucking kidding me.
He's crazy. I'm telling you, buddy. Have you ever hung out with a guy? The guy's nuts.
The only contentious point between the creators is not whether Clay is gay or bi, but to what extent he has repressed his homosexuality. It's open to interpretation whether or not Clay is fully aware of his feelings for Danielle, or if he is so repressed that he calls it something else. Alcohol also plays a role in Clay's sexuality and how he expresses it. Alcohol allows him to both perform his role as a heterosexual man and reveal his most authentic self. Drinking numbs him enough for him to endure the pain of playing a role that is not natural to him. Clay is hungover when Blberta coerces him into a proposal, and he is drunk throughout their wedding and reception. In the show, Clay drinks every day from the moment he wakes up until he goes to bed at night in order to deal with his life. It's also heavily implied that Clay is often, if not always, drunk during sex with Blberta. In other settings, drinking allows him to lower his inhibitions enough to reveal his most authentic self. Clay and Danielle always meet at Forgetty's, a public space where they can drink as much as they please. In this setting, Clay is comfortable flirting and allows Danielle to touch him. There are exceptions to their usual meeting spot. When Orel held his movie premiere at the Puppington house, Clay and Danielle were hugging. Alcohol was involved at this point, though. Additionally, they were very physical at the town meeting in God's image. However, their affection towards each other was met with confusion and disgust from Blberta and the town council members. Danielle also enables Clay's drinking, which ultimately leads to his alcoholism becoming worse. This is because Clay allows himself to reciprocate when under the influence. At one point, Danielle even tells Clay, "You're better when you drink." It is also notable that Clay is only able to suggest spending the night with Danielle and to confess his love for him when his alcoholism has significantly worsened.
We're given a lot of information about what makes Clay Puppington tick, if that weren't already evident enough. If you're watching this after the Blberta video, then you'll probably know where I'm going with this already. BPD and NPD are both cluster B personality disorders with some commonality, aside from the heavy stigma that they both carry, that we here at Moralton University are making no such attempts to perpetrate. Clay exhibits some traits of NPD, such as a fragile self-esteem that comes with a deep need for admiration and a preoccupation with the life he sometimes believes that he deserves. But he's otherwise too self-aware to be a narcissist. Some more obvious examples of people with narcissistic personality disorder in the show would be his partner in crime, Coach Stopframe, and Miss Censordoll. There is some debate, but the primary consensus that I've encountered in my own experience with BPD is that there are genetic predispositions, but it's considered a disorder that you develop, not one that you inherit. Clay spends his formative years constantly validated. For someone with BPD, the most minuscule negative events can be day or mood ruining, and Angela helps to stunt his ability to cope with these negative emotions. Her death is what I would consider the abandonment event, but Arthur reinforced the feelings for Clay that her death put into place. You could say that Angela loaded the bullet, but Arthur pulled the trigger. He shuts out others to process these negative emotions. People with BPD often attempt to abandon others before they can be abandoned, whether this is actually happening or merely something that they perceive. BPD and addiction are similar in the sense that they do come with maladaptive coping mechanisms. They are descriptors that we put onto humans who can take negative actions just as any other human can. They can and do hurt the people around them. However, people with BPD or addiction, whether that be to alcohol or some other drugs, are almost always framed as the perpetrator, and everyone in their lives are framed as the victims, whether or not the ill person is the victim in the situation or is equally at fault in whatever negative situation that may be occurring. Religion for Clay helps to fill in the hole that BPD can leave in one's identity. An identity is crafted for him, one that gives him people who are socially discouraged from ever abandoning him, even when he places a multitude of emotional burdens on their shoulders. To be a person Clay deeply holds significant, such as Danielle, comes with as many pros and cons as it is to be someone he doesn't care about, such as Roberta. On one hand, Danielle being Clay's favorite person in the BPD definition of the term means being responsible for his validation. Accusing Danielle of raping Orel in the same breath as almost begging him to love him is a perfect example of a BPD phenomenon known as splitting, which is shown almost constantly in Clay's dialogue and worldview. For example, all or nothing or religiously flavored black and white thinking, but also contradictory thinking like in Honor. There's a cycle of idealization, devaluation, and tests to prove people's love for him. Liberta, being someone Clay has little desire and empathy for, on the other hand, doesn't save her from being on the receiving end of jealous lashings, as a sense of ownership over her and over Orel is key to the Clay Puppington costume. Clay ultimately is very self-aware and fearful of others seeing his weaknesses.
From Clay's birth and throughout his childhood, Angela Puppington, his mother, cultivated an inappropriately close relationship with him that had few, if any, boundaries. This is an unhealthy dynamic known as enmeshment or emotional incest. In this sort of relationship, the child is made to fulfill the emotional support role of a spouse for one of the parents. Angela's beliefs, emotions, and desires eclipse any sense of self that little Clay has ever had. As a result, he mimics her ideas, believes everything she says, and is never apart from her. Angela was not always a fundamentalist Christian. She may have withdrawn from her husband and social circles as she became more radical during her pregnancy with Clay. Once her prayers for a child were answered, it's possible she shunned her friends and acquaintances and put all her emotional energy into baby Clay. Clay then satisfies all of her social needs as he gets older, but she doesn't allow him his own sense of identity outside of what she's deemed appropriate. Little Clay has not been allowed to be apart from her. His freedom to engage in age-appropriate play and social activities is severely curbed, so by the time he's 12, he's behaving at the social and emotional intelligence of a child half his age. His jealous fit may in fact be mirroring the sort of attachment she binds him with. The behavior of a child is often a reflection of a parent's behavior. His jealousy about her having been pregnant with other children before him suggests that she doesn't like him having friends his own age or ever gives him the opportunity to. Clay was likely homeschooled by her if he believes that the lost commandments are real, which wouldn't give him the opportunity to be around other children. Clay may have felt that he had to manage her emotions or behave in a juvenile way to make her happy. He seemed very aware of what would set off her anxiety and chose activities that appealed to her, such as looking at pictures of himself. By doing so and allowing her to mother him, clean him up, he infantilizes himself for her benefit. Clay later repeats this sort of self-denying behavior when Wilberta suggests he marry her. He's so bothered by her show of negative emotion that he feels like he has to manage it for her by being the thing that she wants him to be. Angela needed him to be the baby. Bloberta needed him to be a husband. In reality, he may have secretly been resentful about being Angela's baby the way he openly hates being Bloberta's husband. If he harbored repressed resentment towards his mother's control, it may have come out through his pranks and covertly rebellious behaviors, for example, sharing when he's done dangerous things to set her off. He also would have felt an intense guilt after her death that he had to repress as well, instead projecting it onto his father who refused to connect with him. So why the inability to move past the emotional incest trauma? Some theories. After his mother's death, his father treated him almost like a romantic rival. Clay may have internalized this in his adolescence. His mother may have served as a thought redirection or thought termination towards his own homosexual inclinations, leading to a phallic mother proxy fetish, which we will explore further in another video centered on a Freudian reading of Moral Orel. She's just the only woman he has ever felt genuine affection for, and in his repressed state, maybe he's convinced himself that he's in love with her. He has a desire to crawl back into the womb to relinquish control of his life and avoid stress and responsibility, as he literally does in his fantasy in nesting. And perhaps Clay has never fully separated his ego from that of his mother, since he was never separated from her in his early childhood.
The million-dollar question asked by Clay's fans, foes, family, and friends is, can Clay Puppington be redeemed? Where the show ended off with its abrupt cancellation, Clay is a dead man walking. But redemption isn't really always the point. Does he need to be forgiven would be a much more apt question. Growth is not contingent on whether others forgive him or not. Atonement is a much better word, or perhaps healing. When we think about the idea of redemption as being forgiven, it's unrealistic to expect that everything he does would be swept under the rug. Each person that he impacted is an individual with their own lives that will go on to affect others in a sort of cycle. As he gets worse, he will eventually hit rock bottom, turning everyone in his life against him. And assuming that Bloberta finally does divorce him for paper mouth, the best thing that he can do is go quietly.
The center of Clay's problems are in his lies and hypocrisy. He wants a family so he isn't alone, but at the same time he doesn't want the responsibility. He wants to go to heaven, but he isn't doing anything to justify achieving it. He wants Danielle, but he's not willing to come out and be with him. Clay defines his identity and place in society through Orel. He feels threatened at the idea of losing Bloberta because it means losing Orel by extension. He defines his self-worth through being Orel's dad. Being Orel's dad is being the opposite of who his father was to him, absent, cold, and vindictive. As the father persona, Clay makes an effort to be present, approachable, and forgiving. The persona he inhabits is entirely that, and in his head there is no room for anything else.
On some level, Clay feels that the father role and committing to Danielle by coming out are at odds with each other, and there's no world in which he can have both. In abstinence, the homophobus joke makes it clear that out gay men are not welcome in Moralton. The destination reads anywhere but here. He grew up in Sinville, so he must have some familiarity with the idea, and might even fantasize about that life for himself, which is implied in his dialogue in Sacrifice. In Honor, this contradiction in his identity comes to a head. Clay is simultaneously jealous of both Danielle for being a better father figure to Orel, and Orel for occupying Danielle's attention. In other words, he has taken on Arthur's role in the dynamic from his childhood, resenting his own son for occupying his lover's attention.
In Sacrifice, Clay goes on to say that he believes the only justice for his actions is to continue on as he always has, providing for his family, staying married to his wife, hating his life, and resenting the people who put him in that position. Clay refuses to entertain the possibility that he's the problem in Orel's life, only coming close in the episode Sacrifice when he admits he's built up a poison that poisons others around him who he loves. Through his gross negligence, he injures his son, very nearly killing him. This incident was maybe the first time Orel was genuinely terrified of his father, and marked a dramatic shift in their dynamic that lacked thorough exploration due to the show's cancellation. In a just situation, this would be the catalyst for the collapse of his life. An abuser should be removed from the home of the child they've harmed. At this point, Bloberta should have divorced him for the safety of her sons. Why she doesn't is an interesting point for speculation, which we explored in our Bloberta video. Definitely check that out once you're done with this one. The only way for him to atone is to accept what he's done and walk away and face his fear of his own worthlessness. It is interesting to note that Bloberta's presence in his life is his catalyst for alcohol abuse, and his relationship with alcohol is directly an extension of his relationship to her. If he left her, while he may not be self-motivated to do so, he may have an easier time trying to sober up without her in his life. Ultimately, any hope for him is foiled by the catch-22 of self-loathing. I hate myself and I harm myself, ergo I need help. But I'm not worth helping, so I continue to self-harm because I hate myself.
And that through your weaknesses you built up a poison that poisoned others around you. That you love. And the only true justice was to let those dominant jackals feed on you, survive off you.
Okay, I want to start with how Clay describes same-sex attraction to Oral. Is that he describes it as loving someone the wrong way. He thought that, the woman might have deserved to suffer because of that, which is telling of maybe how he sees himself.
Well, it's like internalized homophobia, right? Because because I mean that people in Moralton, like, they don't know anything but that. I mean, it's so radically Christian, like their society, that like he can't show his true self like properly, so of course he's going to like see it as a negative thing. So I guess it's like projection in a way too. I don't know if I should call it that, but
I think it counts as projections, that he's he's saying, yeah, she doesn't deserve to die. She deserves to suffer. And that might be something he feels about himself, that death is a kind of mercy.
I don't know. Also something about the way he words it. Like there's clearly like projection and like a lot of internalized homophobia, but I think it's interesting that he says, maybe she loved another woman the wrong way. Like I think there's something kind of, I don't know, there's some kind of like I feel like emotional connection there with the idea of like loving another woman. Like he can understand that, where he doesn't talk about it like some kind of like perverse, like
like
exactly. He says loving, which I think is like humanizes it in a way.
Yeah. So okay, I read this thing once, and I don't remember where I read it, but it was somebody looking up definitions of homosexuality in the dictionary, and in no definition could they find anyone mentioning love, but he's mentioning love.
Oh, wow. Like they always categorize it like sexually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So like even though he's saying like this homophobic thing, like there's also like this very telling piece where it's like he knows what it's like to love someone of the same sex,
or in a way that he conceptualizes as wrong.
Yeah.
It's also worth noting in the Blessed Union, when he goes to pick up Oral from Buried Pleasures, he doesn't have anything particularly scathing to say about Stephanie. All he says is that she's different.
Yes.
Which I think, Clay doesn't really hold back when he's, vindictive of people who are different from him.
Yeah.
There's something that I thought was interesting about the line in Omnipresence. There's almost like a passiveness and a vagueness to it. Like, of course, he's making a definitive statement of trying to teach Oral some kind of lesson, but the God might have had a reason. That word stuck out to me.
Yeah.
The softness of it, almost, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I feel like when he's talking about homosexuality and like he's, trying to frame it in this negative way when he talks about it to Oral, like it still lacks that kind of edge that it has when he's like talking about other things that aren't right or moral or Christian. Like there's something like Lamb said, like something softer about it. Like he can't really. Yeah, I'm losing my train of thought there, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I mean, sorry, I didn't
He
have
does
anything-
also, he does also say in the Blessed Union that, women are smarter than men because they've figured out how to be happy, implying that he hasn't figured out how to be happy.
Clay being mayor, I think it's so funny that Orel had no idea his dad was the mayor.
Yeah, how did he not, like, know that? Like, to some, it's like...
You never see, like, Moralton holding some kind of inauguration or, like, a grand opening of any kind of important building, and that must mean that, like, didn't happen the entire time that Orel was, like, conscious and making memories.
So I get the sense that Clay tries to keep Orel out of his professional life. Like, you'd think that, a politician who's on a Republican platform is going to emphasize their family and show, hey, look at my family, look at how happy we are, family values, but he doesn't do that. And I think it's because, Orel has a way of, like, totally, he'd embarrass him in a lot of ways.
Oh.
I can't even imagine, like...
We saw it in Before All.
Can you guys, like, imagine, like, I know they don't have television, but, like, I can't even imagine, like, a commercial of, like, Clay Puppington, like, mayor commercial, like, during, like, some sort of election
campaign.
It's just, like, campaign commercial. Like,
it would be on the radio.
That's true, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But, like, also, look at that, like, poster, like the posters he had up for his campaign. It was just him, like, with it, like, pulling out his pockets, like, I need money.
He has the worst. He needs to hire someone, because I feel like he's doing this himself.
He doesn't need to hire anyone because nobody else wants to do it.
That's true. You're right. But he was, like, so I guess he was just riding on that for a long time, and, like, the minute that he has any kind of competition, it's just kind of like him begging everybody to let him be mayor, even though he doesn't want to be mayor.
He doesn't.
He needs it to support his family. He's got to pay the mortgage and pay the bills and feed his kids and keep Liberta with her cleaning supplies.
Yeah, her monthly allowance.
Budget.
And, like, speaking of the money thing, because this made me think about it when I was looking through some episodes today. What episode is it? The charity episode. I know that he says that, like, the crack dealer has, like, more money than him, but he also, like, when Orel wants, like, a Bible figurine, like, he buys him the Band-Aids, but then he's like, he kind of, like, insinuates he doesn't like, I don't know if he was just, like, being like, I don't want to buy this for you, but, like, he said he wasn't made of money or whatever. So I don't know.
No, yeah, I mean, like, I think it's kind of just like a parent thing of, like, oh, money doesn't grow on trees. Like, I can remember, like, growing up, like my parents, like, would be at the toy store and it'd be like, I want this action figure. It would be like $10 and it'd be like, I'm not made of money.
Like,
yeah, that's true. But he bought him the case to put his figures in, but he didn't buy him the figure, and I was like, poor Orel.
Then again, like, Orel has a lot of figures.
That's true. That's true.
After a point, he's going to be like, okay, I'm not buying you any more of these.
Yeah. Like, I think it's just kind of like a dad thing or a parent thing of, like,
yeah,
no, you have enough.
Pokemon cards.
That's fair. Sorry, guys.
No, but I think it is a good point. Like, I don't think Clay has, like an excess of, spending money for just, like, things like toys and stuff.
Tell that to Liberta. Sorry, guys.
So true.
Well, so his study, like, it looks like it belongs to someone with a lot of money, but, if you think about it, as a politician, he's got connections, and those connections are lobbyists, and the lobbyists want things from him, and, he's getting bribed. It's Moralton, he's getting bribed.
Yeah, it's like pass this ordinance or this law, or it would be ordinances, right, in a small community?
Yeah, so convince everybody to pass this and we will give you free shit. Or we give you free shit, please convince everybody to pass this. It's a fact of life that politicians love bribes.
Yeah, like just look at all the guns he has. There's no way he bought all of those.
There's no way. Like, that
It
It's
always,
290.
yeah, exactly. And another thing that always makes me laugh about his study is that like some episodes he'll like randomly have like this like very Murica-esque like shit. Like I think there was like a bald eagle thing at one point like in the corner, and it's just like how many weirdo random things does he have?
Most of his taxidermy is endangered animals.
You're right. Yeah. Oh yeah. And then
The bald eagle, the panda, the rhino feet, the elephant feet.
I mean, I guess you could say that goes back to your point of, Clay wants to preserve like life in the form of taxidermy. That's how he does it. So, maybe in his own weird twisted way, he's like, I'm preserving this endangered animal.
Yeah, they're dying out anyway, and if they're dying out, I want one.
Yeah.
That's how he sees it.
Yeah. Also, like a note about his study, I do, like you said, like some episodes he has like all like like Murica stuff. It's like his study decor like changes like pretty often, and I think that's funny because it's just like he'd be the one rearranging it.
It's not Roberta doing it.
He's always got he always has the right lost commandment on the wall too.
Yeah.
Just to
I'm just
conveniently
imagining him pondering the goings on of the week so far and like stroking his chin, looking at his box of lost commandments, figuring out which one he's going to put up next. Or like when he gets a call about something Oral's done, he stops on the way to put up the lost commandment first and then goes to get Oral.
it's
that
all
would
about
not
the
surprise me.
presentation, okay? It's the presentation.
Also, doesn't he have those bar taps in the bar?
The bar is in the rec room.
Yeah.
Because you don't
No,
see
he has a bar in his study. It was a maturity.
He has like
a
the liquor cabinet.
Yeah, the cabinet is in his study, and then he has like an actual like Forgetty's branded bar like in his rec room.
Yeah, exactly. That's what. Yeah.
Which you only really see. You don't see that room very often. It's like
really just in the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah, it's in that one, and then it
3-bedroom, 2-bath house. Damn.
I
They're
still
rolling
think
in
it could
dough.
have been like a city home, like how they give like special homes to to politicians and stuff.
Yeah,
it's possible.
Could be.
I mean, that way they wouldn't have to be paying the mortgage. They're just living there until he gets fired.
Yeah.
So awkward, and it would maybe kind of explain why he needed to keep the job so badly too, in some ways as well. Besides just family.
Yeah. Which makes it extra crazy that Blaberta was like helping Oral campaign against him.
That kind of makes me feel like she wanted him to lose so she could divorce him.
Yeah. Oh, good point.
I could see that, yeah, for sure.
A point for Blaberta for thinking proactively.
Good for her.
Unfortunately, he didn't lose.
Yeah.
Damn. Do you guys think he actually would have lost if Censordoll didn't drop out? Or do you think
I think he had a good chance of losing because, a right-wing town can always go righter.
That's true, but you don't think some of the people in the town would not want to elect her just because she's like female?
I don't think so. She's actually really influential in Moralton. Like she gets
everyone's scared of her.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. They might think she might egg their houses or something.
Also the people were not reacting well to Clay's speech at the debate.
Yeah, because
it
was horrible.
It was horrible.
Fuck, man, that's weird.
He was he was in his own head way too much.
He was not okay.
Succumbing to those intrusive thoughts about chicken pussy.
No.
They're all listening like, was he like this last time?
Has he always been like this?
I just want to say, like, I really love how the show handles this issue. I don't think there's a lot of shows out there that treat like their characters that are alcoholics with like the same level of like thought and care and like treat the issue as realistically as they do here. I mean, I don't think a lot of shows show like just the scope of the effects of alcoholism on the individual and on the people around them.
Yeah,
Exactly. I feel like
when Homer Simpson drinks, it's a joke, and when Rick Sanchez drinks, he can just grow himself a new liver, and when Bojack drinks, he's a horse, so he can drink as much as he wants and not really get drunk. And all of these are examples of like depictions of alcoholics in media, but none of them really consider how like what does that do to a family? What does that do to your mental health? What does it do to your body? And Moral Orel really shows that.
And it's like
in other adult cartoons, there's not a lot of understanding about what it means to be a functional alcoholic or to be a non-functional alcoholic.
Yeah.
And we get to see Clay transitioning from like functioning in his day-to-day life to really not being able to do that anymore.
Yeah, and that's what makes it kind of strides alongside the tonal shift as well. Like once the tone shifts, then it starts being taken seriously. Then we see it slowly escalating as you go through season 2 and into season 3, and obviously nature being like the peak of that. But even in the beginning, I think it's the first chronological episode in season 3. Like in a sense, he's like clearly he can't even get out of bed until like very, very late in the evening, and you see how it's like affecting his life, and he's not even trying to hide it anymore at that point.
No,
and when people start pointing it out, he just he gets more scared and doubles down on it.
Yeah, like Fakey literally suggests like, well, why don't you quit drinking? Like people are starting to notice
that's
it.
True. Is that the first time? Is that the first like he's like literally drinking in a church? Like that has to be like bad, right? Like
it is bad. It wasn't the first time that he was drinking in a church, because the first time was when he was milk. Like it was the milk, and it was spiked milk, so it was watered down. But just bringing like straight liquor into a church with him, that's a sign that he's getting really dependent on it. And Fakey's for all the shit we give him, he was the only character to like point that out and say, what if you stopped? But to Clay, that's just not an option to him. He doesn't know how else to cope with his life.
I don't think he can even conceptualize a life where he's not drinking all the time. I don't think I don't think he sees that as an option.
Exactly.
I also really appreciate how the show approaches Clay's alcoholism from Orel's perspective. And I can really appreciate it as someone that grew up with a parent who struggled with alcoholism. And when I was a kid, like, I didn't know this parent was an alcoholic. I could always tell there were issues, like my mom would make comments and stuff and about my dad, and like, so but it was something that was really hidden from me, and it wasn't until I got older, like into my teen years, that I was really able to realize like the extent of it and how severe it was. And then as a young adult, I remember that this one time, like there was a relapse, and I just remember kind of the fallout of that. And like my dad's sober now, which is awesome. I'm like super proud of him. We have like a pretty good relationship. Like I really love him. But it was I can really understand kind of how Orel is so naive at first about his dad's drinking, and like Clay is a lot more open about it than my dad ever was. But like I don't think Orel really processes that it's like a thing until nature, when it becomes a very direct threat to him.
Sorry, go ahead.
Like does that, I've been rambling for a while. Does that like make sense?
I was gonna say, like, you're absolutely right, because in a way it also kind of mirrors like the audience's perception, because in the beginning of the show we're very linked to Orel's perspective on everything. So to see it, we're kind of seeing it almost the way that he sees it. It's more lighthearted. It's not taken as seriously. But as soon as Orel realizes that it is a problem, that's when we kind of see it in the series as well. I don't know if that's like actually correlated, if it's just a coincidence, but I find it interesting. And I just lost my train of thought, so someone else can go.
No, I mean, so, Orel, the first time we would see him really talk about Clay's drinking is in Orel's movie premiere. He describes his dad as, being constantly drunk. It's okay to go to church drunk. And, he has some perception of it. He doesn't understand how dire the situation is for his dad. It's, in maturity, we're kind of seeing, because if a kid suddenly starts drinking because their dad or their mom or something has like alcohol around the house, that's a pretty serious issue. And when maturity addresses it addresses it like, you can't drink just because you're not old enough. But I personally, one day maybe you can earn that.
Yeah, and that's how Clay always frames it. It's like when you get older, you like have to deal with all like the stressors and miseries of life, and that's when you earn the right to drink. So I mean, in Orel's head, he's just going to come away with that with, I'm not old enough to drink. I haven't earned the right, but my dad has earned the right to drink. So like yes, he knows that his dad drinks a lot, but it's like he doesn't really have any idea what that means or why that's a negative thing.
Yeah, I mean, even in maturity, he doesn't even, he calls it maturity juice. He doesn't call it alcohol. So I don't think, I don't know how much, like, aware of everything that he is at that point, but I know in movie premiere, obviously, he's showing a lot of, like, awareness of it in some way.
I'm not even sure if, like, he does show, like, a lot of awareness of it, but I'm still not sure that he's really processing, like, the like really negative aspect of it. It's just like, oh, this is part of what my dad does.
It's just like an action to him, maybe.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah, like it's not like a flaw or a threat or a problem or anything. It's just like, oh, my dad drinks alcohol. I'm going to put this in the movie, just like he puts other things people do in the movie.
Man, he really tore Putty a new one.
Yeah.
I love that scene where his mouth just slowly drops and then Blabberta laughs at him.
Yeah. Oh my god. I don't need a girlfriend or a wife or anybody.
I like the Kurt Vonnegut quote that you brought up.
Oh, thank you. I'm a big Kurt Vonnegut fan. He's my favorite author. So any chance to bring him up, really, but like I think this quote just really applies so well to Clay.
What are some of his novels that you would recommend, if you don't mind saying?
My favorite is Cat's Cradle. Slaughterhouse-Five is obviously like the Kurt Vonnegut novel.
I've heard of that.
Yeah,
I've heard a lot of good things that's written.
Yeah, Mother Night is fantastic. He has a collection of short stories. I believe it's Welcome to the Monkey House. That's really good. I really like Sirens of Titan. This is obviously off topic, but those are my recommendations.
It's just a little treat for people who listen this long.
Yeah. Everyone get on the Kurt Vonnegut train. Yeah, but that quote, I just feel it applies so well to Clay as a character, because so much of his role in the show is he's playing this part, and he's playing it every day, like in his private life, at home, in public. Like he doesn't really have much of an opportunity to ever break out of that, and it's become who he is. It's destroying him.
He's not a politician or a dad or a husband or a head of. He's an actor.
Yeah.
He just acts as these roles, and when the role breaks, he just is despairing.
Yeah, like when everything starts to fall apart for him, it's like, where does he even go? This is his entire life he's created for himself. Like, there's not much left after that falls apart.
Exactly. I mean, it's common in a lot of ways that people live their lives. Like, you know, you dedicate yourself to one thing for so long, it's very hard to make the change and, you know, break out of it, especially given the circumstances of the community that he lives in, it being like 10 times worse than the average community. It's just like he can't be his authentic true self because of, you know, all the stigmas placed around him. So he's just kind of stuck having to play this role. And it's funny that he's like a puppet because he's like a little puppet, like being forced to play this person that he isn't. Yeah. And I find that interesting. Should we get into a spicy hot conversation about the sexuality debate?
I said I believe we should. It's a matter of where to start. There's a lot.
Yeah.
We've gone over a lot of it in the past videos as well. But you know, I think what it comes down to is that you know, people can headcanon him the way they want. If they want to see him as bi, they can see him as bi. But I believe him when he says that he hates all women.
Yeah.
Like, he very clearly says he does not like having sex with women.
He's very graphic about it too.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember, you know, when I first watched the show, I didn't think he was gay. I thought he was a bisexual guy who just took advantage of the people around him, and you know, he was bored with his own life. And you know, that's the reading you get when you don't pay attention.
Yes.
And you know, you don't really see, you don't try to see what's going on in his head, and what's going on in his head is very visible through, you know, some various episodes. You see it in Help, you see it in Passing. You know, there's layers to him.
Yeah. And
I mentioned this. Sorry, I mentioned this in one of our conversations about it in the server, but it's easy to get confused, especially in the modern day, because there's a lot of conversations about men's misogyny and how the way that they objectify women to such an extent that it almost seems like it wraps around to being gay. But there's a very, even if it's difficult to put into words, there's a very obvious and specific component that Clay lacks when he says things that might be similar. Like the motivation.
So, you know, in that case, you know, it's a situation in which, like, you know, usually heterosexual men desire to possess women. They desire to control women. And, you know, I'm talking about, like, you know, your typical alt-right incel. And,
yeah, exactly.
And Clay doesn't fit the bill for that, because his problem is that women want things from him, and they want things from him that he can't give.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Does that kind of wrap back to his to how he talks about it in Sacrifice? Like, because I feel like he's like projecting like what is expected of him to do, which is to like keep his like to hoard his family like possessions and stuff like that, including Liberta in that situation, even though he really has no real desire to hold on to her.
Yeah.
So it's like I find that interesting in a way. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think it's really interesting that he's like not to protect, but to like hoard it to yourself. Like, that's not like love or affection. That's like, I'm expected to do this, and
Not even attraction, because you know, nothing he says about how he describes women in that whole sequence, it doesn't. You know, he's more mad that people expect him to want to have a woman in his life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And something that gets brought up here that I think would be a good thing to explain. When we were writing the script, you guys cleared something up for me. Maybe we could explain the difference between comphet and heterosexism, if that's the right word.
The assumption that people should situate themselves in a heterosexual relationship as the default. This can apply to both bi and gay people. But, you know, compulsory heterosexuality is something you suffer from if you're only same-sex attracted, because if you naturally are inclined to be attracted to an opposite sex partner, then it's not compulsory. Is that making sense? Do I need to reword that?
It's like, so it's about the wording of it specifically, not necessarily the overall like situation. Or I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand the difference because
I think the word compulsory specifically is making things a little difficult because it's just hard to wrap the head around, because it technically is compulsory in either situation. Even if you come out of it being okay with being in an opposite sex relationship, you were still pushed in that direction against.
Yeah, but okay, that's the thing. You don't if you're naturally attracted to an opposite sex partner, you're not experiencing it as compulsory. You're experiencing it as a natural inclination to love that person. In the case of Clay, he is shoved into a marriage where he has to be with this person regardless of whether or not he feels attraction to her.
Okay, I understand. For just as a bonus question that has nothing to do with Clay, how do you word that in a situation? Because like you could be bi but still feel pressured to get with a
that's heterosexual.
That's the okay. That's the distinction. Yeah. So
that's the
they're
distinction.
Still both horrible things, but it's just two different flavors of horrible things.
It's two different. It's like heterosexism. Like you may feel like a pressure to choose one way over the other, but like compulsory heterosexuality, it's like
it's about whether or not you have options.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
I also think something that's really interesting about Clay, he's the mayor. He's got some status, and I think I think you could say that if Clay wanted to, he could have an affair with a woman at any time.
Yeah,
he's in the kind of
that always confused me that he's in this Christian town. And if he is interested in both men and women, why isn't he pursuing any of the many gorgeous women in Moralton and cheating on his wife with one of them instead of pursuing a man who,
like that's really risky where he is. Like
when you guys brought that up, that was a big selling point for me. Like that really kind of put it in a different perspective too, because it's like if he really was. Yeah, why didn't he? I mean, he doesn't care. Obviously, he doesn't care that Blaberta's doing it, and I doubt Blaberta would care if he was doing it. So, it's like one of those situations where, he could have easily abused his power and done that, but he didn't.
Yeah, he's also like as the mayor, like he could have, we see it in it's a thing historically. Like he could have like a young hot secretary that he has an affair with, but he does.
Too.
But he does, but and like he doesn't do anything with her, and I don't even. She sounds like she's older. We only hear her voice. Anyway,
I forgot what she sounded like. To be honest, I just remember the paperweights.
The mayor was
but it's like he has basically he could choose any woman he wanted to have an affair with, and he never does. He specifically chose Danielle pursued him and Clay reciprocated that, and that's an incredibly risky move. Like if Clay was attracted to women, he could just be like, no, it's not worth that. If I want to have an affair, I can go find a woman to have an affair with.
Another thing is oh, sorry, go ahead.
But it's like he isn't attracted to women, he's attracted to men, and he really, really loves Danielle, and it's like, well, he's going to pursue that, even though it is, dangerous for him, his reputation.
And I think it's interesting to note that he only started pursuing that when another man did it first. So it's like that was his green flag, to let go. And I don't think he ever would have even done something like that.
If you think about it, he's the last guy in town to try sleeping with a prostitute when the option is open.
Yeah, and it's like a craze at that point. And that sounds horrible, but
it's like everybody's doing it. What's all the hubbub about?
And that's how he is a lot of the time. He's it's like this suggestion that like, oh, you should think about women. Like it's the same thing with Roberta and Help when she's like, oh, well, now that I brought you out of your shell, like maybe you could consider a wife. And he's like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe. And then he's like looking at all the women. Like he only like pursues women as like a suggestion.
Oh, so okay, so we talked a bit about when he was trying out the voyeurism kink with Roberta, and about how this is a non-contact sort of kink where he just watches. What like the fact that he asked for two souls to save, and that makes me wonder if he wanted to watch, because that's been established as like something he's interested in, or if it was something he was experimenting with. I feel like it's safe to say he was experimenting throughout season 2 and trying different things and seeing what works and what doesn't. And some things were working and some things were not working. And what was working was being around Danielle. And I think maybe that scared him.
Oh, yeah. And that's the season where the Lust Guard gets upgraded twice.
Yes.
And then season 2 ends with him having like a psychotic break about having sex with women and how he hates it and it hurts him. Like that's not a man that's attracted to women.
Honestly, yeah, and like if you go by like the methods that he was, the methods that he was going by to try and like comply within that season, it just kind of like honestly it almost acts like further evidence, because like it really just led to this like big culmination at the end. And we know that like overall it's about his marital sex, but like I don't know what I lost my. I'm sorry guys, I had a point there.
Well, we don't know what he tried to do with the other 2 sex workers, and needless to say he didn't have a great experience with that based on how he reacts in nature.
Yeah, like it just I'm just trying to say it kind of supplements it in a way. Like, if that was something he was trying to do to conform, like, it just adds another layer to it.
It shows that it's not just about Roberta.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if it was just about him not enjoying his, marriage with her, it would be a different conversation. Like, the way he would word it, it's the act itself that is, so vile to him.
No, it's, to him, the act is vile.
Yeah. Like... And, we decided to make this its own video because it's such a huge topic, where we're going to do like a Freudian reading of passing and nesting and Clay and Censordoll. But like to just briefly touch on Censordoll here, like I feel like we need to like do like a quick thing about why that's not like a genuine attraction to a woman.
Oh, yes.
Well, we'd have to first address that his relationship with his mother when he was a child wasn't really a very emotionally healthy or safe relationship for him, because he was at her mercy in a way that, children shouldn't have to shoulder the burden of being emotionally responsible for their parents the way that he was for her, the way that he was like, he wasn't allowed to be like away from her for 5 minutes. And he would have been very, attuned to her emotions and attuned to her anxieties. And she was a very anxious woman. So there's something about that dynamic that, he may have felt that he needed to project a certain personality to her. And what I think is that he gets stuck doing that with any relationship he has with a woman.
Yeah. Like, especially if the woman shows him some kind of like maternal affection. Like that really ramps it up. Like, because Roberta did that in Help. And she's like, stroking his face, and she's like, oh, like, like what's wrong? Like, it was very like, very like motherly.
She said, "What's wrong, sourpuss?" That was the weirdest line I've ever heard of her mouth.
Yeah.
She was laying it on thick.
Yeah, but it was like very maternal, and he responded to that.
Exactly.
And with Censordoll, like
she's taking
prior
advantage of
to
him.
Yeah, the
yeah, like
Censordoll one feels
she
like emotional rape. Like, I don't know, like, is
That's
that a term?
no, I wouldn't call it emotional rape. I would call it that, you know, it would be hard to call it grooming because they're both adults who are the same age,
Yeah.
but
it sure feels like
It's
clearly regressing in that
icky.
moment.
It's a very
It's emotionally regressing. So when you watch it, it's disgusting because you see this older woman, you know, coming on to someone who's mentally behaving like a child.
yeah. And because like it's so deliberate on her part, like you know the debate, she picks up so fast on the fact that like he's got these very serious mommy issues, and then that's you know when she goes to see him at Forgetty's, it's like she's immediately like, you know, I can be your mommy, and he's like, and he like that's he immediately like regresses and he acts very very childish, and she you know has him like wrapped around her finger, like it's not like he's like genuinely like sexually attracted to her. It's like,
well, he wasn't attracted to her before that.
No,
you know,
not at all.
And it's just like
this is like her jumping on a weakness that he has.
And the dialogue, I find the dialogue in that section of the episode really hard to listen to. Just because
it's crazy.
Because it's so like it's so clear like what his mental state is in that moment. And she's just so clearly like taking advantage of the situation. That is actually like I would count that as one of the harder parts for me to like listen to. Like just I can handle it, but it's just like ugh, like it gives me such ick.
Like she's just so clearly taking advantage of him when he's in an extremely vulnerable state mentally and emotionally. And like at that point in the show, Clay is like really not doing well. Like his alcoholism is like the worst it's ever been. His relationship with Orel is like completely broken. Like you know, he's not in a good spot in any way, and that really primes him for being manipulated by Censordoll. It's not hard for her to and like you got to remember, like she has this whole agenda of what she wants to do. Like she wants more power. Like I mean, yes, it's like, oh, she wants eggs legal again, but it's also like she wants more of this power, and you know, maybe she doesn't even need to be mayor to get it. She can manipulate him. Like she sees that he has this really like deep pain related to his mother, and she's like, oh, I can take advantage of that to kind of treat him like a puppet. Like I can get what I need politically out of him by giving him what, you know, maybe he's craving like emotionally.
You know, setting aside the emotional manipulation and just the general ickiness of the situation, like when you look at Censordoll as a character, you know, this is a character who has been voiced by 3 different actors on occasion, and they're all male. She's essentially a drag role. She's intended to be a cis female character who is played by a man, and there's a history of drag roles in you know, gay film. If you look into John Waters' film, films like Hairspray, you know, it's you get a certain association with the character.
It was you made a point just when we were like chatting before the recording about Censordoll being more masculine and the egg being very phallic.
Yeah, there's like they're putting down something in that scene which is, you know, interesting in the context of like Clay's sexuality. You mentioned it, that the fact that like Censordoll, she having no eggs, she can't get pregnant, having like essentially has no sex drive based on, you know, what we can understand of you know, what the treatment for that might have been, especially since it's clear that she's been through menopause based on her appearance. Oh, okay. So, you know, when she's coming on to him, the thing that she does is put his hand in her lap. And that's, you know, it's a very forward, very feel my dick move. And it's You know?
Sorry. No, I'm just thinking about it because she just
exactly what she was doing.
But the egg is sitting upright in her lap.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that
like a pig.
Yeah.
It's like an erect penis.
Literally.
Like it's
Guys,
It's
sorry,
such
I'm
a
having a mental
strange
breakdown about
subversion
this.
of the. It's such a strange subversion of visual imagery that eggs are associated with.
Yeah.
Like a perversion almost.
I'm just like I'm doing the
Really?
like the Christian the cross with my fingers right now at Censordoll. Unholy. Evil egg penis.
And
I'm just saying, you know, out of any of like the women that Clay could have had an affair with, Censordoll, she kind of straddles this sexless sort of line where she, you know, she has this masculine energy to her that she's you know, presenting to him as well.
Yeah, even the role that she tries to take up would be, I know like she is still like a woman in her role, and she like, I know that the role that she goes about it with is like being a librarian, but she does kind of play a more like typical masculine role with what her motivations and stuff are.
Yeah, there's a
very interesting character.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know we're getting a little too into Censordoll right now, but like.
Well, so, you know, once we get into the Freudian reading, there's a lot more we can unpack with her, because it requires being extremely familiar with a lot of Sigmund Freud's ideas to really get what's going on there. And we will get to that, we promise.
Yeah. Oh, I do want to say one more thing about, you know, the whole situation in nesting, because this is something I also brought up in our like brief conversation earlier, and it's that kissing Censordoll seems to give Clay a sense of clarity about what he wants from Danielle. Up until this point, like, we know their relationship has not been consummated, and it's after this like kiss with Censordoll, you know, he and Danielle have that conversation on the phone, and this is the first time that Clay is very, like, I think, explicit in what he desires from Danielle. He basically says, like, you know, let me come over to your apartment tonight. I'll bring the big stuffed bear I made for you. And it's the implication is like, I want to come over and I want to have sex with you. And that's something Clay has not expressed before. We don't really know if he's been to Danielle's apartment before. We know for a fact they have not consummated their relationship. Like, that's something the creators have said in a commentary, right?
We showed that clip.
Yeah. So that's the first time Clay is really like, this is, I want to take this step with you. And it comes after the kiss with Censordoll, which I think is interesting.
Oh, so a lot of people really seem to think that Clay has NPD. He has some of the traits, but I don't think he has enough of the traits to be considered someone with NPD, as opposed to like Stop Frame and Censordoll, because they're very, very obviously narcissistic, and in different ways too.
And both disorders are part of the same cluster, so they're related. It's just not the same.
Yeah, you know, in the case of Stop Frame, you know, we talked about the fact that Clay's very self-aware, but I get the sense that Danielle has very little self-awareness of the way that he treats people, and when he does have awareness of it, he doesn't feel bad.
Yeah, he proudly states that he doesn't feel bad.
He does in Numb, when he's talking to Blaberta, like, she's like, you know, like, you liked me once, and then it's all like, you know, you were just trying to get closer to him, you know, and he's like, oh, and I don't care. What a freeing thought, or something. And it's like, he says very directly, he doesn't care. Like, he really doesn't care how she's hurt.
Wait, yeah, he doesn't care.
And it's not necessarily to say that people with NPD can never have a level of self-awareness, but self-awareness is almost an aspect of, like, in some cases, it's an aspect of healing. It's not something that characterizes a disorder itself. Whereas something like BPD, there's a level of self-awareness to the point that it's detrimental to you.
With Censordoll, she just straight up has a god complex.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I like that one line. It's like, that god even makes me feel inferior. I love that line.
You know, she really does believe that she knows what's good for everybody, and that she wants to, you know, enforce that into Moralton. And she's charismatic enough that people, like, they really do follow her. They really do believe in what she says.
Yeah, because people were just blindly, like... I don't even know if the people who were helping her burn the books in the first episode even knew what they were burning. Like, I think one of them asked if she was gonna burn the Bible. And she said, what did she say? She was just the... Was it the Old Testament?
Yeah, only the Jewish parts.
Only the Jewish parts. Okay, yeah, that's what it was. Sorry, guys.
Which is it's so interesting if we want to talk about accountability in a sense, because with the idea of Christian supersessionism, there's the idea that Judaism was real, it happened. The First Testament is very much, you know, those were the Jews. But then Jesus came along, and you'll often hear, if you bring up to a Christian person, oh, why do you eat shellfish? Why do you do mixed fabrics if you're going to pick and choose with, like, being gay, for example? And they say, oh, well, in the New Testament, Jesus made a deal with us, and we don't have to do that anymore. It's characterized by a lack.
Yeah, and I think another thing with Censordoll, like, this kind of sway she has over people, is that she is just, like, so, like, self-assured and, like, her own, like, knowledge and abilities. Like, she is like, I am right, I am always right, and she's never gonna, like, show any sign of, like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. So, like, people gravitate to that, I guess.
Yeah,
so they're just gonna be like, oh yeah, I'll go with whatever she's doing. She knows what she's doing.
Yeah, and obviously, I guess this circles back to, like, the comparison of, you know, like, Clay being narcissistic or BPD, but, like, he doesn't have this, like, high level of confidence in himself, and he just...
That's how she's able to take control of him.
Yeah. She picks up on the fact that he is very weak and vulnerable, and she's like, oh yeah, that's easy, I can...
He has a very fragile sense of self. You know, both Danielle and Censordoll, while they both have, like, really strong narcissistic, like, traits, it shows in different ways. They behave very differently. They both have this need to sort of control their situation. In Danielle's case, you know, he's so obsessed with getting Clay to love him that he's willing to go to any length to do it. And he doesn't seem to think that there's anything wrong with his methods. You know, he sort of conceptualizes him as, like, the center of what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, he was fully ready to sacrifice Orel to Satan if it meant he could get Clay. So it's like
main character energy.
Yeah.
And I guess if we're going to talk about Danielle, it'll be a good time to touch a little bit more on the concept of a favorite person, because it's crazy how well it. Just in case the audience members didn't catch this at other points, because I never really came right out and said it, but I'm a person with BPD, so I'm not just, like, talking out of my ass in a villainizing sense here. Sometimes we get so emotionally intense in our relationships that it is just fucking crazy, just to lay that out there. With Clay and Danielle's relationship, Danielle is sometimes Clay's emotional center. Like, I wouldn't put it past Clay to revolve his emotions of the day around a single interaction with Danielle, for example. Even before something like Honor, which is a huge turning point in his life. Like, something like, I could very well see something like Clay misinterpreting something that Daniel does very often because he's having a bad day, and it just completely ruining his week.
I actually have a question, because, you know, I don't know, like, a lot about BPD or, like, kind of the whole definition of favorite person. Could you say that, like, Orel is a favorite person to Clay? Because I was just wondering, because, you know, like, he places so much value in being a father. Like, he's like, if I'm not a father, I'm just a husband. That's worthless. So I was curious.
I wouldn't necessarily say it crosses over into favorite person territory, but he's definitely incredibly significant because he not only, like, if we compare Boberta and Oral for a second, Blobs is a prop in his identity, but Oral is that, and somebody who emotionally validates him, seeks him out, makes him feel good. Like, especially in the scene where Clay talks about how he has to separate his love between multiple different people. He doesn't necessarily have to, he can take much more than he gives.
Thank you for explaining that, because I was, like, genuinely curious if, like, you know, if
not to say that somebody's child can never be their favorite person. I just don't think in this case that it is. In fact, you know, sometimes people who were raised by a parent with BPD, especially maybe like a single parent, it happens a lot because you need somebody close to you to regulate your emotions because you can't do that so well yourself.
Okay, so I found the definitions. Like for Danielle, he really fits the profile for the sort of high functioning / exhibitionistic subtype for NPD, which is described as people who are grandiose, competitive, attention seeking, and sexually provocative. And he's shown himself to be like that throughout the show. And you know, he's, you know, this group has been found to be like relatively they have fewer psychological issues and higher rates of obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So in his head, you know, this sort of, you know, machine-like way in which he kind of builds his world, this need for everything to be perfect. You know, the students, when they run track, they have to win. You know, he has to have a perfect body. Anyone he engages in a sexual relationship with, he has to perceive them as being kind of perfect in a way. That fits in with, you know, the excessive perfectionism of OCPD. So that's posited as like the cause of the impairment is that it's egocentric. So he doesn't see it as a problem that he's a perfectionist.
I think we talked about this before. I think you did put that exact diagnosis out, and it really does like feel like it fits him like scarily well.
Yeah.
And of course we can get more into that when we do the Danielle and the Puppingtons video. That's gonna be
that's gonna be a fun one.
Yeah.
I found a graphic if you look in the to read off for the audience. This is we can put it up on the screen also in the video. It's a circle chart with some of the different types of borderline personality disorder. We have quiet BPD, which is characterized by being afraid of being abandoned. They keep their emotions inside and they blame themselves rather than others. We have impulsive BPD, which tends to be distracted and hyperactive. They have chaotic emotions and risky behaviors, can harm themselves or others. We have petulant borderline, which they have unpredictable mood swings and a passive-aggressive personality style with a need to feel in control. It sounds familiar. And self-destructive BPD, which also sounds familiar, shows masochistic traits, direct feelings inward, which can lead to harmful and abusive behaviors, often moody and suicidal.
So I see these arrows kind of leading into each other. Is it that, you know, these different types can kind of evolve into each other, or it's like...
I definitely think that's the case. I personally, this is one aspect of BPD that I haven't really had much experience with myself, but I think that with the nature of BPD itself, it's like every person with borderline can be one of these four and often shifts between the four. There's just one that is almost like the foundation of like which symptom of BPD is the most intense.
Okay. So I would say, I mean, maybe just to me, I feel like Clay maybe fits self-destructive best, and I see also pieces of him in quiet and petulant.
Exactly. I definitely think seeing it as a cycle makes the most sense.
He kind of fit the impulsive one in Honor, like the beginning of Honor.
That's true.
Exactly.
Yeah, because it's all aspects of the same.
It's very funny to me.
At the end of the day, right?
It's really exactly, and it's kind of funny to me to define different types of borderline personality disorder when it's characterized by a lack of identity, because it makes complete sense to me that somebody who doesn't really have a very stable identity would swing between these depending on depending on maybe if they have more than one kind of identity that they're projecting out into the world. The situation calls for how people are treating them, if they're masked. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna make a stupid joke. I was gonna say this is where we reveal ourselves as an Arthur Puppington hate blog.
Yes.
Yeah, the real tragedy of the cancellation of Moral Orel was that it didn't present an opportunity for me to walk onto the screen and shoot Arthur Puppington myself.
Oh my god!
Like, it's just, it's like, obviously all the characters are complex, and like in Beforel, we see like this side of Arthur that's very like likable, but it's like Arthur's also a character that's done a lot of damage, and I would like to beat him up for it.
Sometimes I feel like...
Honestly, I feel like I can't analyze him impartially because I find what he did to his child so
abhorrent.
It's the show makes an interesting it presents an interesting question, which is like, is it better to leave your kid or is it better to cause them harm and stay in their life? Either the case could be made for either.
Arthur kind of did both.
He kind of did, yeah. And I feel like some people, I think when they watch Beforel Orel, they almost like it like overwrites their perception of him because he's nice to Orel. But like that doesn't change.
He's kind of he's presented as the voice of reason because he's an atheist, and he's the only atheist besides possibly Stephanie, but you could argue she's a Buddhist. But with Arthur, he's presented as like the voice of reason and that he's right, and that people in Moralton are wrong and corrupt.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. It feels a little unbalanced in a way.
It almost kind of speaks against the overall message of the show, I feel, in a way, because I feel like typically Moral Orel doesn't openly, like, they criticize the hypocrisy of religion, but they don't blame people for being religious in a way. It's just the people that weaponize religious values.
Exactly.
And to have the mouthpiece of the episode, like, almost make it, what does he say? He's like,
people tell lies. Some people are telling things that aren't true.
And he also tells to Orel, he's like, you're the only... He says something along the lines of he's like the only like bright spot in the town or something. I don't...
You're too pure to be corrupted by this town, which isn't true because he's consistently being corrupted by the town throughout the show.
And it's not like there's not bad... It's not like there's not like good-hearted people in Moralton that are just like victims of the values of the town, like they're... There are good souls in the town, and Orel he's still a good person, but it's more so about how the values of people that use the religion in a negative way affect his mindset, and him taking it in such a literal sense that it becomes something
and
different.
It's very it's so weird that this guy who are you saying you thought your child was inherently corrupt and that was why you abandoned him?
Ooh.
Was that what, like, is that the idea that you have in your head? Like,
I think he projected a lot of anger he had towards Angela onto Clay. Cause like, I mean, I think it's, we discussed this in like the scripted part as well, but like, Angela probably wasn't always a fundamentalist Christian. Like, this is something that developed over the course of her pregnancy with Clay. And I feel like that would really drive a wedge between her and Arthur. And I think they'd been kind of drifting apart for a while. Like, because, we see the photographs of them in the album when Angela's flipping through them. And in each photo, they get like further apart from each other. So clearly there were some problems. But I think what Arthur does is he projects a lot of the anger and hurt he feels because of Angela onto Clay, because it's like he doesn't want to be mad at Angela.
Yeah, And that doesn't make it any better, obviously. Catalysting
No.
a child into like a scapegoat is like, well, so Clay was 100%, he was a scapegoat in his own family, even though he's an only child. For Arthur specifically,
it's just, you know, what that would do to a child to just constantly be reminded that, you know, their actions resulted in somebody's death.
That's so scary.
And for him to do that over and over is like, it's truly such a damaging thing.
Yeah, it's so terrible. The way that he says, "Can you pass the ketchup that you killed your mother with?" is like so traumatizing to like that has to have fucked him up. Like
that child is 12.
I just realized,
dude, Oral committed like multiple counts of rape and murder and all these things, and Clay just lets it go.
Yeah, I will say one thing for Clay. He really is trying to be a better father than his father was. And like with you know, eventually disastrous results. But like he wants to be a good father, and I think that's more than we can say for Arthur.
Yeah,
you know, he went into it with the understanding of what Arthur had done wrong in his life.
Yeah. Sorry, were you trying to say something, Glam?
Yeah, I realized that with Angela's death and the whole gun thing and Clay being denied the hunting trip, he's being pushed into, and of course with the things with learning about his mother's miscarriages, he's like cycling through death being forced into his consciousness, and then him not really being given a chance to understand with it or really engage with it. Because imagine if Arthur had taken Clay on the hunting trip and used that as some kind of life moment, bonding moment and life lesson.
Yeah.
About the weight of a life and responsibility.
Yeah. And
the way, go on.
I was gonna say like and like we're obviously gonna rag on Arthur a lot, but like Angela's also a reason. Like Angela was also a bad parent, and it's like I was gonna say like I don't think Clay ever would have been allowed to go on this hunting trip. You know, even if Angela had lived, like I don't think she would have let him go.
No, I think she would have. Nah, yeah,
like,
I don't think so.
She's so unhealthily attached to him. Like I don't. She's like, you know, we obviously discussed this in the video, but like she doesn't give him room to grow and to expand his way of thinking and to be a person on his own. Like the two of them, like they might as well be like physical extensions of each other. Like they can't stand being apart from each other, and it's she is not a good mother. And like the two, Arthur and Angela, really just failed Clay in so many ways, and like the different ways that they failed him was just like such a horrible, disastrous combination.
Yeah, I have to imagine what it must have been like to have one extreme side of the spectrum in terms of like an unhealthy dynamic with a parent, in terms of like a like toxic closeness, and then after that's ripped away, it's just replaced with the complete opposite of just like
he won't hug him.
Yeah.
He won't show any affection. All he does is hit him, and he's willing to accept being hit as a kind of affection. You know, he's you know, I want to go into this point a little more in the oral video once we get to that. But you know, there's this concept in psychology about the false self as it develops in early childhood, and the idea is that, you know, as long as you're getting good enough parenting, then you develop a healthy you know, relationship with that parent. But you know, when you, as a baby or as like a child, you start to sense that your parent has some weakness or that there's something they can't give you, you start to say, okay, I don't even want that actually. If you're not going to give me hugs, then I don't need the hugs. If you're not going to let me go out and play, then I don't need that. You know, it's fine. So it's like this defense mechanism that a child develops in order to, you know, kind of cope with their situation. And I think it's like really interesting to look at Oral in that context. But for this video, we're going to focus on how Clay kind of grew into that role where The false self that he developed was, it was a reflection of Angela and her needs as like, this codependent sort of anxious personality. If she didn't want him to go on that hunting trip, he would have said, okay, I don't need to. If you need me to just be the baby, I'll be the baby. And, the activities that he chooses to, share with her, like saying, hey, let's go look at more pictures of me when I was little. That's what she wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What does he want to do? Or does he even know what he wants to do?
I don't think he even knows.
He shows like a little bit of curiosity with the gun. Because, he plays it, holding it like a man, the way his dad told him to. But then he kind of tests her with it. Then he goes to her and says, Dad made me hold a gun. And he sees her freak out. And then he knows, okay, so this is a no-go.
Yeah.
He's an interesting kid. The way he's reacting to his situation. And it's hard to tell with Arthur whether he's displaying a new kind of false self in which, if he's misbehaving or if he's, showing a certain amount of, what's it called? If he's being a little cat to him, then he's getting a reaction. He wants the reaction because he's otherwise getting nothing from his father. And it could be argued that, the true self is the self that tries to get its needs met. So this is his way of getting his needs met. Or it could be like another false self that, well, it probably is the true self in that case, because he's not doing it for Arthur. He's doing it for himself.
Yeah. And Clay's such a sad character.
Yeah.
Like I also think something that's really, I think an interaction that Clay and Angela have that's stuck out to me is, when he's getting upset about learning that he has all these siblings that died before they could be born. Like when he runs away and he says, I'm not going to be your precious only living ever anymore. And she calls after him, but she calls him one of the dead siblings' names. And I always thought that was so interesting. Like, I kind of wonder if Clay isn't so much as like someone she loves because he's Clay, but because he's just the baby that survived. And it's like, he's just like this, like I finally have a baby, and like, he really just can't be his own person, like he's like all of the babies that didn't make it.
I thought that part was really fucked up. Like when the first time I heard it, I was like that's not, I don't feel like that's the natural kind of slip up that someone would have. Like that's not normal.
For her, like, she's so aware of the lives that were lost, and I think like when she sees him, she's hyper aware of it. So, all those other babies, he carries them around with him, whether he knows it or not.
Yeah. I just feel like he would never really be able to be his own person because he's going to be carrying that burden for Angela.
I also feel like it's the case with Arthur as well, in which like Arthur maybe had lost hope that he was ever going to be a father. And he thought, you know what, she's not going to have a living child, so I think I should not keep my hopes up. And then Clay shows up, and, I feel like that would have affected his attachment to Clay.
Yeah. I mean, there could have been a fear that maybe at some point he was afraid that Clay wouldn't live very long. I don't know, like he might have been afraid, maybe, the other babies died before they could be born, but maybe Clay is going to have these health issues. Like, you just, all these things have happened. You worry, like you finally have this thing, like, is it going to last? But then I think, Clay does live, and then it becomes, well, we got this baby, but this baby destroyed the person that I loved. It's not the same person anymore. Puppingtons versus Hyman Tax. Who's the more fucked up family? Fight.
They're both really bad, but it's not a contest, guys.
Yeah.
To be clear, I was joking.
I know you were joking. I know.
To the Torment Nexus, we're picketing your ass.
All right. So, what else do we want to touch on here?
The familial section.
I mean, like, I guess you talked about it in the video, but just like, I really, when we recently discussed the similarities, because, we discussed these concepts together, like, in the server before we make these videos. But like the similarities between Blabberta and Angela, like, really just kind of blew me away. Like, they both have these like kind of obsessive tendencies, and like I'm not finding words well right now, but
I was about to say they even sound the same.
They're both voiced by Berta.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think anybody who fills that like mother archetype would be enough for Clay in that situation, for them to become like a surrogate for his like memories of his mother.
Yeah.
It's just that deep set and unhealthy.
Oh.
Did anybody want to talk about any of the other points in this section? Do we want to here, I got one. Arthur Puppington has no fucking hair. What that scalp do? Like, roast Putty all you want, but at least he has the decency to put a fucking toupee on his head. Don't show me that string cheese.
God punished Arthur for being an atheist, and he let Clay keep his hair for believing in him.
Curious. Clay might have that receding hairline, but at least he's not bald. I think atonement is something that could have happened for Clay. I think if the show had run its intended course, we would have seen that in some way, shape, or form for him. And, I don't think anyone needs to forgive him for what he's done. Yeah. He's done a lot of damage. Like, no one should ever be required to forgive the people that hurt them. But, I think Clay is capable of changing for the better and healing from, all the trauma that he has and all the pain that he feels. Like, I think he is capable of moving in a more positive direction, but, we'll never really know what it looks like.
Clay is the kind of guy who would have a blast in therapy.
Oh yeah.
Put him in front of like a psychoanalyst and let him yap about who he is in his life and everything that's gone wrong, and he would just he'd never want to leave. He would love being in therapy.
I think it kind of circles back also to the concept of like people being okay, almost in a sense, by saying that they're okay with the way that the season ended in its cancellation, that they're okay with this like incomplete story where the implications of it are just simply that Orel is like trapped in a very horrible home for the rest of his time until he's an adult, and then then he just magically heals. He God sprinkled some trauma erasure dust over him, and it allowed him to absolve all of the weight off his shoulders, and now he has a dog.
Yeah. Oh my god!
Like, the way it was shaping up, Orel had like a very similar. He was getting into that cycle of beginning to hate his father for what he's done for him, what he's done to him, and it would have been so interesting to see how he breaks that cycle.
Yeah, because it really is like it's the exact same age as well that Clay like kind of had to go through all of his stuff as well with his father. So it's like the cycle repeating itself, and if Orel is truly the one that breaks this cycle, I want to know how and why that happened. I don't want it to just be told to me. I understand that that's not their fault that they got canceled, but I can't be satisfied with that.
And this idea that, you know, Oral is kind of larger than life as a protagonist and he isn't affected by what happens to him, or, you know, there was something really interesting that happened in nature. And so when Clay drinks the rubbing alcohol, that's like the point where Oral, you know, his facade just like falls, and he tells him he hates him. That's not something you would ever hear from Oral. That's, you know, a moment in which like a boy has suddenly realized that, like, you know, his hero is not a hero at all. He's a vindictive guy who's, you know, in this moment of inebriation, this moment of carelessness, he doesn't care if he hurts him. So that, I feel, is a very, you know, that's a formative experience for him. That's a big traumatic experience. And then the next day, when his father has awoken, he's sobered up, he sees the bear. Because he doesn't remember anything that happened the night before, he wants Oral to tell him that Oral shot the bear, because that was the whole reason they came out there. He wants his kid to be able to shoot an animal. He wants this confirmation that he as a father did the thing for his son that his own father couldn't do for him, that he you know, taught him how to fend for himself and be a man and shoot a bear. And Oral did shoot the bear, but, you know, you see this emotional change happen in him, and he lies. He said, "No, Dad, you shot the bear." And that's a moment in which Oral let his anger at his father corrupt him. He you know, he wanted his father to be unhappy in that moment. He wanted to lie. And I feel like that's a moment that people, they don't think about how significant that is, in that, you know, Oral, who's been, you know, so uncorruptible for most of the series, aside from his crimes, which we know in great detail. Check out our
electric chair.
But he's, you know, he has this moment. It's really a coming of age moment. It's really this moment of separation from the father.
Yeah. And you know, I also wonder, you know, throughout the show, like, Oral gets these lectures when he's done something wrong. And, you know, even if like the lesson he's given isn't the right lesson, he's always forced to acknowledge he's done something wrong. And I think, you know, part of it for Oral, like that like kind of anger and resentment that bubbles up for him, is that Clay will not like acknowledge what he's done. He's like, "Oh, I didn't do that. I don't remember it, so I didn't do it." And I think maybe that kind of double standard like is very upsetting to Oral, because I mean, like, he looks up to his father as like this role model for this, you know, so this person he looks up to. He you know, models himself after his dad. Like, you know, that's who he looks up to. And so for his father, who, you know, always handles all of his mistakes with, like, you know, a lecture and spanking, or like, you know, you take accountability, you have to acknowledge you've done this. I mean, that would be infuriating for, you know, your father to shoot you, and then he just goes, "Well, I don't remember it, so I didn't do it, so it's not my fault."
So of course, you know, he wants to punish him in return. He tells him, "No, I didn't shoot the bear. I don't want you to be happy.
Yeah,
I'm not going to make you happy."
It's pivotal because we see him seeking the approval of Clay for the entire series, and this is the one time where he's willing to openly praise Oral for this, and he denies him. You know, he doesn't seek it out in that moment because he kind of sees him differently at that time. So it's,
you know, whether in a way, Clay did exactly what he set out to do, and Orel's become a man in a way, in that he doesn't need his father anymore. He doesn't need his approval.
Because the show ends at a point where it's like Orel grew up happily ever after. He's married to Christina. They have 2 kids and a dog, like beautiful, perfect family life. And then the photo on the wall of Clay and Bloberta, oh, they were miserable forever. Like that's such a disservice to all the characters. Like,
I feel like
it implies that he stayed in the home of the guy who shot him, and that it's such an upsetting thought, that like to imagine that was how the series would end, and I feel like it wouldn't have been. I feel like there would have been some real justice for all of the Puppingtons.
And it would have been so good to see this plotline or arc where Orel has to grapple with the fact that he can't forgive his father. And like we kind of get that in Honor, where it's like, I don't have anything to honor about him. But I think seeing Orel really have to contend with the fact that he doesn't want to forgive his father for what he did to him, like, and also kind of, because that kind of goes against his like all like his beliefs and his faith that's so based on like, oh, forgive people, like that would be really like, that would be a really difficult thing for Orel to have to process and work through.
Honor, like we talked in our first video about how it wasn't supposed to be the finale of either the season or the series, and the fact that like, Orel, he comes to this understanding about his father at the end of the episode. It's almost like he's forgiven him a little. It's almost like he's realized there are things about him that I don't fully understand. And it's like he wants to protect him from
sorry, go ahead.
what he's about to do.
It feels like Honor was like its original intended plot placement was to be like a climax to like the first act of season 3. So it was like we were at the top of the hill. And then they just pulled the plug, and they used like they got out the movie editor, and they pasted that that ending to the end of it. So it's just like we get this like, and I think I spoke about this before also in our first video, but it's really jarring to see that that shift with all the missing episodes in season 3, to see this shift of Orel being this happy-go-lucky kid that's constantly looking up to his father. Then nature happens, and suddenly they haven't talked for 8 months, and we don't get to see any of that.
It wasn't supposed to happen at Christmas, Honor. It would have happened somewhere else in the timeline, which makes me feel like it would have been a follow-up to Sacrifice would have happened, and it would have been Sacrifice and then Easter.
So we think so then it wouldn't have been as much of a time gap, that he wasn't like that they were on like rockier terms.
It's such an interesting thing that like if the episode between Sacrifice and Honor had been Easter, then we would have introduced Arthur Puppington dying, and that would have led into Clay with his honor thy father thing. And that's interesting. The implications are interesting, because Clay hates his father. And he resents him for not being a man of God, and he resents him for the way he treated him. And I feel like his dad dying would be the kind of stressor that would just kind of like send him spiraling.
I want to know what would have happened, like how they would have resolved their, because they would have had to have some sort of resolution to their, what the hell? They would have had to have some sort of resolution to everything that they've had, they've experienced throughout their lives, and how he treated him and all this. So it's like
where was that gonna go? What would have been, and I almost feel like there would have been a lack of resolution, and that would have sent Clay further down, because he's the kind of guy who's not going to change until he's hit rock bottom.
And I think it also would have been really interesting to see these kind of side-by-side storylines of Clay, dealing with his father, who he hates, dying in his house, and like, you know, whatever kind of resolution or lack of resolution there is there, that happening kind of parallel to Oral struggling to deal with like this image he had of his father just completely shattering, and now he can't forgive him and he can't honor him, and just kind of those things happening side by side, I think would have been very interesting.
You know, by the time we're at Narcissism, the script that didn't get produced, you know, Oral, he's kind of over it. He's not mad at his father anymore, and he's worried that his dad's going to get even sadder. And that kind of makes me feel like that happened post Honor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that would make sense. I mean, that's probably Clay's lowest point emotionally.
Yeah.
Because at the end of Honor, you really do see Oral, like, he's almost like pitying his dad, I think. He's like, Dad, come on, like let's leave, like we should go, like.
Yeah. It's almost like he's the parent.
Yeah, yeah, and I also kind of, I mean, this is sort of just me like speculating, just word vomiting a bit, but like, you know, with the way Clay had to manage Angela's emotions, I wonder if maybe Oral would have become more cognizant of the way she needs to manage Clay's emotions.
Yes, I do feel like there's a very important parallel between the way that the relationship that Clay had with his mother that was deeply enmeshed, and where, you know, he had to project this false self to make her feel secure, and how Oral presents himself to Clay. And oh my God, Oral is so interesting. I have so many thoughts on how his dynamic with Clay is, and just, you know, how Clay's parenting style has affected him. But that's gotta wait till
the Oral video.
This has been Moralton University. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to hear more of our yapping, please like and subscribe, and also make sure to check out our playlists as well, because we have some great links for you guys where you can learn more about the show and potentially watch the show. If you haven't seen it yet, go watch it, please. We need you to watch the show.
Yeah, if you're on episode 5 and you still haven't watched the show, shame on you. You're going in the timeout corner. Go watch the show.
To the torment.
See me in my study.
I will track you down myself, find your information, and mail you and mail you a secret USB of every single Moral Oral episode.
It's free on YouTube, guys. Free, FREE. Free moraloralreport.com. Go.
Yeah. But in all seriousness, thank you for watching.